8:37 this morning, time for us to turn our attention to the NFL. I'm delighted to say Mike Carlson is with us. Mike, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Not quite so bleary-eyed as I was last week because I managed to make myself go to bed at halftime of the Saints-Bucks game, even though it was tied, but got up early to catch up with it. Good weekend of football, though.
In the end, Tom Brady won, so that was the storyline from that. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other big storyline that we have to talk about is that Patrick Mahomes' Kansas City Chiefs saw off the Cleveland Browns. It was a much closer game in the end because Patrick Mahomes went off injured with a concussion, and this could end up being the most important moment of the entire season.
Yeah, it really could. And in fairness, it was still a close game when Mahomes went off. You know, he was very, very effective in the first half, or up to about the last 5 minutes of the first half. But in the second half, they weren't having their way with Cleveland, and Cleveland were back in the game. And it took some last-minute heroics by Chad Henne after he threw an interception to win the game for them. But if Mahomes is gone, obviously that changes both the nature of the matchup with the Chiefs next week for the Bills. And the Bills, you know, had a pretty good game against Baltimore. But it also takes away the big selling point, which would be next weekend, would be two old quarterbacks matched up against each other and two of the young quarterbacks matched up against each other. And nobody really wants to see, I think, Chad Henne at quarterback for the Chiefs. You know, the Chiefs are a better team than that. Henne quarterbacked in Week 17, but remember they rested Jason Kelce, Tyreek Hill, their offensive stars as well. So he's not as bad as people think, but that's not the matchup that anybody wants.
No, so let's just talk a little bit about that game and about Andy Reid's peculiar type of genius. So we've talked a good bit about Andy Reid over the last number of years and how the Super Bowl has kind of elevated all of his previous work to a point where he's now considered one of the all-time great coaches because of his innovations. So he's the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. It's at the very end of the game, they need one more first down to burn the clock and kill the final 2 minutes. And they decide to go for it on 4th and 1, or how did that whole thing come about? Because that seems to be Tony Romo in the commentary box was like, they're not going to do a real play here. They're going to punt this.
Yeah, it was kind of Tony Romo at his worst, where he was getting the most excited and making predictions that didn't come true. Andy Reid outfoxed him as well as everybody else. They were on a 3rd and long. It was about, I think it was 3rd and 14, and Henne was under a lot of pressure. They were coming at him hard, but he scrambled away and he dove for the first down, and it looked like he had made it. Tony Romo was going crazy. This was his Havlicek stole the ball moment. But it turned out when you looked at it on replay that as he was diving, his elbow and forearm had hit the ground. So the ball was marked back short of the first down. So now you had a 4th and short, and Andy decided to go for it. Field. So if he doesn't make it, he's handing the Browns a good shot at coming up with a score that would win the game because they were only up by 5. And they line up in a shotgun formation, which surprised everybody because everyone was figuring, well, it's Chad Henne with a quarterback sneak or something like that. And then Romo decides that what they're doing is trying to draw Cleveland offside, which is something that teams were doing a lot in this playoff weekend, but doesn't work as often as probably not often enough to justify wasting the time out on it. But instead, he runs just a quick out to Tyreek Hill. They roll out. Tyreek Hill gets off the line very quickly. Nobody can catch up to him. They get him the ball very smartly. He stays in bounds, and they run out the clock. It was a brilliant piece of play calling that nobody was really expecting. But it's one of those things where, if you want the old football adages, you go to your best players when you need the yardage, and his best players are Tyreek Hill and Jason Kelce at this point. So put the ball in their hands, let them do it. And I just loved that. I mean, I think I tweeted at the time, how do you not love Andy Reid at this point? He's kind of like the big Santa Claus of the NFL.
So we obviously don't know yet how bad the concussion that Mahomes suffered is, but he also had a toe injury. So if he does make it back next week, it's not going to be at full tilt, is it?
Well, I don't know. the toe did seem to be bothering him, and it's without knowing what it is, you don't know whether it was just a bruise. If it's turf toe or something, he could really be bothered. I don't think that would keep him out. The concussion's another story, and it's basically out of the Chiefs' hands. It's up to the doctors. He really was punchy when he got up. By the time he ran into the locker room, he looked relatively normal, but obviously he failed the concussion protocol. Most of the time, a week is enough time for guys to come back. But your guess is probably as good as mine, as there'll be a lot of pressure, obviously. He'll want to come back, which is always the worst thing in terms of pressure on him. But I'd kind of be surprised if he doesn't play. Not shocked, but surprised.
Okay, so they're going to be up against the Bills next week, and the Bills did a very good job of shutting down Lamar Jackson, who is the last season's MVP and who looked like he was getting back to that level of form. How did they manage to do that?
Yeah, it was kind of like last year with the Titans, or it's kind of like what the Titans did, what the Bills did to the Ravens did to the Titans the week before. They tried to shut down the Baltimore running game and make Lamar Jackson beat them passing and from the pocket. They did a really good job of containing him in the pocket so that his running wasn't a factor the way it was the week before against the Titans, and they played a zone that wasn't going to let the receivers get by, whereas the Ravens had played man-to-man against the Titans receivers. But, it exposed the lack of receivers and the lack of outside throwing by Jackson. And, people were now calling, for a rethink of that Ravens offense. Strangely enough, the Ravens dominated the game offensively, time of possession, yardage, things like that, but they were never able to move the ball consistently. And really the big play of that game was the pick six, the 101 yards by Taron Johnson, which changed the game completely. And, it was by no means, Buffalo couldn't run the ball at all. So it's going to, Josh Allen's going to have his work cut out for him next week, regardless of who plays quarterback for Kansas City, because Kansas City's largest weakness, as we saw against the Browns, is their run defense, not their pass defense, but their run defense. And the Bills are very, very dependent on the pass.
Kansas City 3-point favorites at the moment for that game. I think that's pricing in an uncertainty about whether or not Patrick Mahomes is going to play. In the other one, it is the two best quarterbacks of their generation, and it seems odd to say that Aaron Rodgers is on the same kind of level as Tom Brady, despite the fact that he has 5 rings less than him. And yet, the way Aaron Rodgers is playing at the moment is as well as any quarterback has ever played.
Yeah, and let's not get confused. Tom Brady didn't really win that game for the Bucs. The Bucs defense won that game for the Bucs, and they made plays where the Saints defense didn't. The Saints dropped a couple of interceptions that could have changed the tenor of the game. The Bucs hung on to theirs. They picked up a great fumble recovery. They gave Brady short fields in that game. Rodgers, the Packers were never really in danger in that game against the Rams, but it looked like a couple of times the Rams were going to be able to get back in it. And remember, the Rams are a very, very good defensive team, although Aaron Donald was playing injured, and that was pretty obvious in that game. Rodgers has been phenomenal for most of the season, incredibly accurate. I keep saying this, and I'll say it another time, and I've said it actually for a couple of years. When everyone went crazy for that Patrick Mahomes no-look pass a couple of years ago, I said right then that Aaron Rodgers was Patrick Mahomes before Patrick Mahomes was Patrick Mahomes. He does all the same things. He can throw no-look passes. He throws on the run. He threw a beautiful touchdown pass off his back foot. He right now is playing as well as he has played. Green Bay's offense was pretty good all around. They can run the ball. They used 3 backs. They all ran well against the Rams. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup for for them. They tend to look like they're playing a guessing game on defense where they rely on pass rush, and it's kind of like guessing whether or not they're going to do that. But Tom Brady's shown in the last few weeks, that the old scheme of rushing Brady is the way to disrupt him hasn't really worked. Washington couldn't do it, and they have a really strong front, and really, unless you can come right in his face up the middle and stop him from stepping forward in the pocket, he loves pass rush. If you use more than 4 guys to generate it, he's going to find the open man somewhere. So, I think this is a great weekend coming up because you have the matchup of these 2 old quarterbacks who are both Hall of Famers, for sure. And then you have the matchup, if Mahomes plays, of Mahomes against Josh Allen, 2 young quarterbacks. It's taken Allen a couple of years to get to where he is, but right now, you've got probably the 4 best quarterbacks in the league right now in terms of how they're playing. It was sad watching Drew Brees, not being able to win that game, but he lost a lot of weapons, including Deontay Harris on the first kickoff return of the game, which was awful for them. Taysom Hill and Latavius Murray weren't there, so Kamara had to handle almost everything for them, and they really couldn't do it. It was weird that their big play of the game was that touchdown pass from Jameis Winston, who last year was the Bucs quarterback, on a trick play that the Bears had run against New Orleans last week. And Davon Wims dropped the touchdown pass that would have made that Bears-New Orleans game a lot closer. But like I say, it was the Bucs defense that got them where they were. It was a tremendous defensive game. They stopped Mike Evans from even catching a ball. He could have had a touchdown early in the game, but he was just out of bounds on that. He got beaten by Sean Murphy Bunting for an interception that was almost a pick six. And you have to give a lot of credit to the Bucs for being able to run the ball. Leonard Fournette looking like he did when he was a rookie in Jacksonville.
Right. Fairly remarkable. I did want to just ask one quick question in the context of something else that's going on. An amazing piece in Sports Illustrated about the dysfunction in Houston. And if you think about the career that Aaron Rodgers has had in Green Bay, which a decade of which where he was as good as Patrick Mahomes is effectively wasted because his head coach is a numpty. Deshaun Watson is now sitting in a scenario where the entire organization is dysfunctional, and it's the biggest non-story story so far that he may yet ask for a trade. He's on the verge of it. He hasn't quite pressed the button. He's waiting to see who the new head coach is going to be. But coaching really matters in the NFL in a way that in other sports, in soccer, for example, you can be top scorer, you can have a great career. Eventually they'll sack the coach and somebody new will come in. In the NFL, you can be landed with really bad coaching and it can ruin your career.
Absolutely. It's so important. And I think players often don't realize it enough. It's so important to go to a system and a situation that suits you, that's tailor-made for you. That's what Brady did, obviously, made the right choice going to Tampa Bay. And that's not speaking in hindsight, said that at the beginning of the season. Watson, Bill O'Brien was supposed to be a quarterback whisperer, based on his coaching Tom Brady, which we know it doesn't take I could be Tom Brady's quarterback coach. I think getting along with him is probably the biggest thing. And, Watson, after his injury, was a different quarterback, and they never quite were able to figure out exactly how to make him work best. Trading DeAndre Hopkins last year didn't help. And they fired O'Brien, and now it's a cesspool there. It's a real mess. The guy who's running the team is Jack Easterby, came from the Patriots. He was basically a chaplain, a morale coach, whatever that means. And it seems like he's been intriguing his way into control of this team. It's going to be very difficult, I think, to persuade a coach to go there. They have no salary cap room. They've got a lot of overpaid veterans, especially on the defense. They don't have many offensive weapons. They don't have draft picks because O'Brien traded most of those away. So it's a bad situation, and Watson's clearly unhappy with it. The only solution for the Texans, I think, is to probably do what Watson wanted to do in the first place, where all this kind of controversy started, saying they should hire Eric Bieniemy, the Chiefs' offensive coordinator, as a coach. And Bieniemy never gets enough respect when the coaching carousel comes around. I don't know what will happen, and he might be due his chance, and it might be that he perceives that going to Houston might be the only chance he gets if Houston offer him the job, and it'll be a question of how much control he's going to have over what happens personnel-wise, but also the chance to work with Watson might be an attractive one there, even though, as I said, they don't really have any weapons for him. It really needs a whole makeover. And whether Bieniemy, who I think is a fine coach, and I think will probably be a good head coach, whether he's a guy to supervise a makeover, I don't know. Jack Easterby certainly isn't. So it would depend a lot on who they hire as a general manager and how much power that general manager has underneath Easterby and probably the team ownership. But it is a snake pit down there, which I don't think a lot of coaches are going to want to go down to. But, if it's your only chance and you're at an age where you might not get another one, it would be a good one. And I think Bieniemy deserves his chance as a head coach.
Mike, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, mate.